I had been living with my sister for a few months while saving for my own apartment. It wasn't ideal, but I needed a place close to work, and she offered half-jokingly, "You can stay, but don't think this is free." I agreed, silently. I didn't mind contributing, paying my share, and even helping with the bills. What I didn't expect was how she would frame it, as if I owed her everything. One evening, I handed her the rent money along with the utility bills. She glanced at the stack, raised an eyebrow, and smirked. "Hey, if you enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the bell. Your support means everything and helps me keep creating. Thank you so much." "You're lucky I even let you pay my bills," she said. Her tone was smug, as if she were doing me a favor rather than the opposite. I paused for a moment. I could feel the familiar burn of irritation, the desire to snap back, but I chose not to. I simply nodded, pretending acceptance, letting her think she had won the argument. Inside, I was calculating, because this was the pattern I had learned to recognize. My sister always tried to assert dominance, framing acts of courtesy as power plays. She thrived on making people feel indebted, small, or inferior. I remembered all the times she had done this, using family favors, loans, and even casual assistance as a tool to control or belittle. But this time, it wasn't going to work. I kept my composure and smiled faintly. "Thanks," I said, as if agreeing with her statement. Her smirk widened. She thought she had conquered me. Then I pulled out my phone and began showing her something she hadn't expected, the spreadsheet I had been keeping meticulously for months. I had tracked every utility, every bill, every shared expense, not just for accountability, but for clarity. "This," I said slowly, pointing to the spreadsheet, "shows exactly how much I've contributed since moving in. Rent, electricity, groceries, even the internet you complain about." Her expression faltered slightly, but she tried to maintain her smug demeanor. And I continued, "I've been doing all this without asking for anything in return. I also noticed several payments you claimed I hadn't made. Look carefully." I scrolled through, showing her the records, receipts, timestamps, and bank transfers. Her face tightened. She realized she had misrepresented the situation, trying to assert dominance without considering that I had been prepared. I leaned back slightly and said, "So, yes, I pay your bills, but that doesn't mean you get to belittle me while pretending it's generosity." She froze, her smirk gone, replaced with a mix of irritation and disbelief. It was a small victory, but it felt powerful. For once, the balance of control shifted slightly, and she had no idea it was happening. Because the moment I nodded and let her think she had won, that was the moment I planned my next move. I wasn't just paying her bills. I was quietly setting the stage for her to realize that I wasn't naive, that I noticed everything, and that her power over me was not as absolute as she believed. And the look on her face told me she was beginning to understand. For the first time in years, she had underestimated me. And that was the best part. Her shock lasted only a moment before she tried to recover. "Well, that's impressive," she said, forcing a smile. But her eyes flickered to the phone, betraying the panic beneath her composure. She realized she had misjudged me, thinking I would quietly accept her condescending tone without question. I calmly set the phone down and continued. "I also noticed something else," I said, letting the pause stretch just long enough to make her uneasy. "Several bills you claimed were paid in full, utilities, the cable, even the internet, were missing at least partial payments. I covered those too, without complaint." Her hands tightened into fists. "That's you're keeping track?" She spat, trying to sound casual but failing. "Yes," I said simply. "I keep track. I don't make assumptions. I verify." I could see the tension building. She hated being caught. She was used to asserting authority, not being fact-checked by someone she considered subordinate. Then I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. And I think it's important to note something else. This isn't charity. I'm not doing you a favor by paying bills you are capable of paying yourself. This is accountability. I want transparency, fairness, and respect. If you expect me to contribute, you need to treat me as an equal, not as someone who owes you everything. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I could see her mind racing, realizing that all her subtle manipulations, her condescension, her smug comments about letting me pay her bills had just been dismantled quietly, methodically, in a way she couldn't deflect. I leaned back, keeping my tone casual. I'd been silent about this for months, letting you assume you had all the control. But now, it's time we adjust expectations. I pay my share. I pay fairly. I expect respect in return. The room felt heavier. She didn't want to admit she had been wrong, but she couldn't ignore the facts. My records, my preparation, my calm assertiveness, everything demonstrated that her control over me was an illusion. Finally, she muttered, I see. Not a real apology, but an acknowledgement. That was enough for now. I smiled, faintly, letting the moment linger. It wasn't just about bills. It was about dynamics, about showing her that I wasn't naive, that I noticed, and that I could respond strategically rather than emotionally. She had always underestimated me, thinking I would be passive. But today, the quiet balance shifted. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't argued. I hadn't even shown anger. Yet I had asserted authority in a way she couldn't challenge. Over the next few weeks, she changed subtly. Her comments became more measured, less condescending. She stopped framing favors as power plays. She still acted like she was in control, but I could see the awareness in her eyes. She knew she couldn't take me for granted anymore. And that realization, that quiet acknowledgement of my presence and capabilities, was far more satisfying than any argument, any loud confrontation, or any dramatic act of defiance. I kept paying my share. I kept the records. I kept the composure. And every time she tried to assert dominance subtly, I reminded myself that her real power over me had been broken the moment I nodded and planned my next move. Because sometimes the best way to win is to appear passive while quietly taking control. And by that measure, I had won. A few days later, she brought up the bills again, trying to test the waters. I could just cover everything myself, she said, smirking. I smiled lightly. You could, but we agreed on fairness. Her face flickered. Annoyance, disbelief, and finally reluctant respect. She realized, silently, that her attempts to assert dominance had failed. From that day on, she stopped framing favors as power plays. She didn't need to admit it out loud. Her behavior spoke for her. I had nodded, let her think she won, and quietly shifted the balance. And that was more satisfying than any argument ever could be,